everyone, and welcome back to another episode of our podcast, Get Started. I'm Manpreet, your host, and today we have a new guest. We have here Alessandro, and he is a student at the HEC Paris and has diverse experiences from the NGOs working in Africa, going to startups, and then exploring healthcare sectors. So I think this podcast is going to be very, very interesting. Welcome, Alessandro, for being here. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
So, Alessandro, let's start with your HEC Paris experience. I don't know how to pronounce this. Maybe you can correct me, or what the full form is at least. So, what made you apply there? What in general is it? And what has been your experience till now?
Yeah, of course. Well, the way you say it is fine. HEC is perfect. Some French people will tell you to say HEC instead, but
And that's too much.
it's perfect. So I can tell you a bit about the experience itself. It was quite interesting, I would say. I came into it from a bachelor in economics in Milan. I knew that it felt like the right choice. Going into the private sector, of course, HEC was going to give me a good brand, a good network. And when I made the choice to go there, I didn't really do it for the academics at all, if I have to be honest. I come from a country where you study a lot theoretically. The classic way to learn is to give you big, large books, ask you to do exams on it, and then teach you nothing about real life. Then they give you a paper, and they send you off to a job market which you're not ready for. And I think at HEC, I knew that I was going to get something much more pragmatic. And I looked at the academic offering, it seemed interesting, but it was much more what I could learn from my peers and from just getting things done, which ended up happening, actually. I can say a bit more about how it was like for me once I got there.
Yes,
and
please.
I think I'm not the only one. I've spoken with a lot of my peers, and it was quite common, this feeling. You arrived there, and the first few months, you all had imposter syndrome. Essentially, the criteria to get into HEC is to be a good storyteller, to learn how to sell yourself, like all good business schools, which meant that you met everyone, and they were all showing you this amazing side of themselves, and you saw no flaws whatsoever. You immediately thought that everybody was godlike. And the only full picture that you had of a person was yourself. So you knew your flaws and you knew your problems. And I spoke to people afterwards, about 6 months in, when everyone lost this feeling a bit, because you actually get to know the people. And they told me that everyone had this, almost everyone at least. So after you get through this period, you maybe discover a bit more what you want to do. And at that point, it becomes a more pleasant experience. You can enjoy your time with the others more. And that part I liked very much.
How was it in general to live in Paris?
You don't really live in Paris. That's the catch.
Okay, I see.
It's called HEC Paris, but it is in a campus outside of Paris, around 1 hour away.
But isn't everything like outside of Paris? Whatever it is, it's always outside of Paris.
It's a good point. There is one business school that is inside of Paris. We were all very jealous of it.
Wow.
It's ESCP. But all the other business schools, you're right, they're quite outside. I think HEC is one of the further out. And it forces you, I'll be honest, the campus life I loved. You essentially stay in a campus with a bunch of people. You're 1 hour away from the city. And during the week, at least, you're forced to engage and forced to attend events, because otherwise you do nothing.
Yeah.
And if everyone is there and if everyone is living the same life, it becomes an amazing experience. I'm a bit biased. I had my basketball club. I had the Italian Association of HEC, so I was very well integrated. But for example, now there is the second year of our masters, and a lot of people are still at HEC, while I decided to go to a different university. And the people that remained at HEC were not given a place on campus. They stayed in the city, and now we're essentially going back and forth every day. It's a completely different experience. Now they don't have the campus life anymore. And if you take that out, it's not so good.
No?
No.
Okay.
No.
And you already told about some challenges. What were the advantages going to HEC? What is like you say, okay, this shaped me?
I would say, so there's a lot of things. The first one would be just thinking in larger terms.
Mm-hmm.
You become very ambitious in whatever you want to do. You realize that the world is much smaller than you thought. Every time that you look at a position that you want to get to a certain end goal, you can always be proactive and figure out ways to get there that are maybe a little less conventional. You can reach out to a lot of people. You can maybe make yourself known in the world by essentially being out there and creating a brand. And you see so many people do it that you learn by imitation, essentially. And I didn't have this before. Before, if I saw something interesting, I would maybe have stopped and not dared contacting random people. And we're not talking about a few people, we're talking about hundreds of people. We become experts at bothering people on LinkedIn. And that is a great mentality to have in general. I would say it depends which field you're getting into. There is of course the standard business career paths that everybody goes after, which is consulting and IB and all these professional services. Even if you're looking at startups the way that I was, the network is quite powerful, and you can just apply whatever other people are doing for these two sectors to the startup sector. It works quite well. Everything that's missing is a bit of that product mindset, a bit of that building mindset, because people become so good at going after careers that are already made that you don't really learn how to build. But if you integrate that, you have a full picture. It's great.
Okay, nice to hear that. And like, was there a type of culture shock as well, like which you got? Like maybe you explained it a bit, but like something where you said, "Oh, okay, that like completely blew my mind." And like comparing from your other university experiences, school experiences, what was different there?
Think academically, I did say that you were kind of expecting a different experience.
Yeah.
I was a bit shocked when I found that indeed the learnings are interesting, and you have people that are professionals teaching instead of just professors. But I was expecting I could maybe go a bit easier on the academic side and really focus on the work. And I did in a way, but in another, the competitiveness remains, because you have curved grades where everybody's competing with each other. So that was a bit of I would say a bit of a cultural shock, because I came from a university where I was studying out of curiosity and out of motivation. And at times at HEC, it really felt like you were studying just for the grade, in a way that I wasn't used to, at least. I still am not. I mean, now that I'm not in HEC anymore, I'm in another university. I'm in TUM in Munich. I don't do this. I don't really care about the grades anymore. I learn because I'm curious, and at HEC it just felt forced so much.
Okay, I see. So in general, like if somebody wants to come up to you and say, "Hey, Alessandro, I want to do, like, I don't know, like the same experience as you, go to a top business school, university," what would you suggest them, or like any advice you want to give them along their way?
I've always given advice, practical advice on how to get in. You need to know exactly why you want to join, and normally there is of course a part about your goals and about what you really want, which will be expressed in the cover letters, for example. And then there is a bit more of an operative side to it, which is how do you tell it? How well can you tell your story, which is 90% of the work, to be honest. But I would definitely think a lot about what HEC can bring you, or what a big prestigious business school can bring you in terms of your end goals, and then make sure to have it pop up very well in a cover letter. In terms of preparation to get then in the university, I would say really try to be prepared to be influenced a bit.
Okay.
No, don't come with a naive mindset, because it will maybe kill you. And you need to make sure that you know what you're getting into. So it's a competitive environment. Everybody kind of compares themselves to others, and everybody goes after the same thing. So even if you have an idea of what you want to do, I think it's very important that you don't just conform to what everyone else is doing. Make sure that you remember it, because that was you before the business school, that was you before all that influence. And if you lose it, then you're just going to have a bit of a crisis, I think, 3 years in, where you realize, oh, this is not what I want to do. And you're still going to have to go back to it. So just make sure that you keep it. Make sure that you know.
I think that's actually very nice advice. I like
Yeah.
it. So I would now talk about your NGO experience. So you have done some NGO work in Africa. So maybe you tell us something about your experience and what you learned, like personally and professionally. So how was it? What did you do? Anything?
Yeah. The NGO I came by this experience quite randomly. It was before HEC. I was at my Milan University, Università Cattolica. And over there, they had this nice charity work program where you could essentially either work in a country and do the classic charity work stuff, which would be, for example, helping a school in teaching students, or helping children in any other way in any other country. And then you had this alternative where you could spend a longer time instead of the usual 3 weeks, maybe spend a few months and work with an NGO, supporting them in their daily operations. I had a summer that was free, and I thought it would be a nice way to learn about Africa, which I was always so curious about. I learned about development economics. I learned how, in theory, we help these countries, and I was curious to just see on the ground exactly what it takes. So I signed up, I got in, and over there, I learned a bit how NGO works at large, the way that the projects are being proposed by some institutions like EU, and the way that NGOs essentially send their own way that they would address this proposal and compete with each other to get the project. And then once you get the project, it's all about operations. It's all about whether or not you can realize it. The NGO I worked in was doing economic development projects. For example, microfinancing was the one that I was given. It's a microfinancing project to help farmers. You would give them fertilizers and seeds, and at very small scales, but to a lot of farmers. I hope that you would get an economic outcome, but also a social outcome. So they would hire some people, maybe some of the women that were not really working in the communities, to do the job. And another side was helping startups, because they figured out that there are very entrepreneurial people in Africa because of the lack of institutions. And if you help a founder develop their own startup, they will hire so many people in the community, and they will create such value that is probably even, I think that created more value than the microfinancing could do. And it's because of this amazing mentality that people in Africa have, which I took. It's probably what taught me that entrepreneurship is important. It's just seeing the small ways in which they are entrepreneurial every day. Everybody has their own shop. Everybody has to, in some way, make money, and it makes them very resourceful, let's say, because you don't have a lot of resources. So
that's true. I actually wanted to ask you, how the NGO changed your mindset to come into startups. Like, how did it help you? But you kind of answered this question, but maybe you want to add something to it.
Yeah, I would say it certainly sparked a bit of an interest, which was already there. I knew that I wanted to be a founder, and every decision that I made after my bachelor's was a bit oriented towards reverse engineering the careers of big unicorn founders and trying to make sense. In hindsight, it wasn't the best approach, but I knew that to be a founder, you needed a good network. I know that surely it required you to be smart, but it was mostly network and obsession. And so the smart part is more to be able to mobilize resources very well, or to get feedback and become somewhat coachable. And so I would say I learned that also in Africa, because that was about the obsession, that was about the mindset. And then I tried to apply it going into HEC. I figured that was the best place for the network. So it's quite entrepreneurial school in the end. I think I'm getting a lot of value also from TUM now. That's probably even more entrepreneurial school. And I'm very happy I did the NGO work. I'm a bit, so to go maybe to another point, I thought about staying and try to do NGO work somewhere else, perhaps. And then I realized that while it's very interesting to help on the ground and you get to see the impact of your action on a daily basis, the impact is minimal. It's not really scalable. If you work for a big company, you might have some compounding effects where you do an action and someone else does an action, and then all of a sudden your small actions are moving maybe thousands or millions in resources. And while you work in an NGO, you know what you're doing. That's true. You can see the impact right away, but it's a small impact. And at the end of the day, I think they would have gotten to me because you can just see so many resources being moved.
Yeah.
So maybe making an impact at large as an entrepreneur, creating value a bit more as an entrepreneur felt more interesting to me.
Okay, I see. And you, besides that, you also had like a taste of VC. Maybe you can explain that, and like the healthcare sector. So these are like compared are two different worlds, but like still maybe you can explain what you made them explore, or like what surprised you there the most. So just in general, your experience.
I can talk about VC. It was specifically for digital health.
Maybe you can explain what VC in general is.
Yes, yes, of course. Well, VC in general, venture capital, otherwise, is a type of investment that companies do in the private markets, where you try to take a minority stake in early stage companies, with hopes to then get a large return when the stakes are sold, either through secondary sales or IPOs or strategic acquisitions of the startup. Further down the road, we're talking about 8 years afterwards normally. It's very different from other types of private investing, like private equity, where you get majority stakes and you actively try to change the company by bringing operational support. In this case, instead, you just invest in the company, let them do their thing, but you give a lot of small tickets to a lot of small companies, hoping that one of them becomes that large fund returner, as you call it, the Facebook of the bunch, or the Airbnb, where you get a lot of money in return. So I did this specifically for digital health in a fund called LBO France. And over there, they've been focusing on digital health for a long time. They were one of the first ones to just close in this field. And their approach was interesting. They have medical doctors in the team, by formation at least, and engineers and financial investors. So you get a bit of a good mix, which brings a nice value to the startups. And they were also very experienced people. I was so lucky because I was the only junior in the team. They didn't have a full-time analyst, and they didn't even have a full-time associate. So essentially, you spend a few months where you are the operational point, which does all the deal sourcing, so finds all the startups, is on every call, is on every meeting, because you have to give operational support to these very senior people. It gives you essentially a lot of exposures and a lot of responsibility. The exposure side I wanted a lot. I'd worked in startups before. I had done business plans. I'd seen the bird view of startups, but I wanted to see as many as possible, and I did. And then the responsibility side, while a bit hard at first, I didn't find it that overwhelming after coming from startups, because working in a startup was also quite hard. Operationally, it was probably the hardest thing I've done. And that didn't scare me too much in that team. The one thing that I did struggle with is the fact that you're investing in deep tech companies. And so they are quite hard to understand and to wrap your head around. I didn't have any health background, any engineering background. So every day was essentially for me a conversation with ChatGPT trying to understand the startups. And you have to really be a bit frugal with your time. You have to use this 80-20 rule, because you cannot understand everything, but you just need to understand the story, the need, financially, how it makes sense. And I learned to do that. Still have a lot to learn, but it felt always like the right place to be. Knowing that I didn't know anything, or I didn't know enough, meant that I was in the right place. It's a bit the mindset that we should all have, I think.
Yeah, that's right. So in general. So you are now telling us like very different things you have done in life, like very different sectors. So some people like usually like fear to, they have like, they're scared to switch from one sector to another sector. So what helped you actually to navigate yourself or like find where you actually belong to or what you really like?
I think trying a lot of things is the
Mm-hmm.
way that you find what you like. And every time that you try something, you're not really starting from zero, and you're not really leaving with the same level of knowledge just in another field.
Mm-hmm.
You're stacking on top learnings about yourself, which are going to be important in the end. Every time you find something new, you have to rediscover the way that you learn things, the way that you deal with learning things. It's quite hard to suck at something, and everybody has to in some ways resonate with that.
Mm-hmm.
So the more you get exposed to the experience, I feel like the more you get used to it, and you don't have these mental obstacles anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So I would definitely say that trying different things was a motivator for me,
Mm-hmm.
and I wouldn't be scared of doing it at all. It is a bit hard to motivate the choices, and so sometimes it's hard to get into a new industry in a new sector, and when they do an interview or when they try to select you and you have to explain why you want to do it, you have to make sure that you follow a fil rouge and so it makes sense.
Yeah.
And that's all about storytelling once again. So it was a useful skill that thankfully I got, and I suggest everyone gets one way or another.
I see. And besides that, coming about living abroad and like the cultural experience in general, because I mean, you lived in different environments, Italy, France, Ghana, now Germany. So everything is like kind of cross culture. So how has living abroad influenced you? Not the experience itself, like what you did there, but like the countries or like just being in a different place, culture, anything. How did it influence you?
It started quite when I was quite young and influenced me a lot. Uh, I didn't mention this, but when I was 16, I spent a year in the US, which is something a lot of people can do, and was a bit of a culture shock at first. I didn't get into big, large American cities. You normally go into small towns in the middle
Yeah.
of nowhere, and mine was in Wisconsin, where it was also very cold. But it the way that I got through the experience, aside from having a good host family, which helped, was by fueling this curiosity and making a game out of it.
Yeah.
I wanted to know how Americans thought and how Americans behaved. And I wanted to give a rationale behind it so that it would fit well in my head, essentially. Why are they so different? Why historically have they been so different? And
Mm.
what is the reasons behind this cultural shift? It got me through that period, motivated me to go through it. And then I found the same thing when I studied abroad again. I did an Erasmus in Regensburg,
Mm-hmm.
and that's where I actually met Rodrigo.
Ah.
And over there, the same thing applied. Germans, for me, are a very, very interesting breed.
Mm-hmm.
I would say they're very interesting people. And I tried to study them. I tried to understand why are they so different from Italians and from Latin people. And then again, you leave with an understanding, and
Mm-hmm.
you leave with a hypothesis that you try to always test. And this is essentially what being abroad was for me. And what still motivates me to be abroad and to go abroad is because you get these understandings, which may be a bit biased,
Mm-hmm.
but that's also the fun of it. You maybe have a bias and you have to find that it was and that it shouldn't have been there, and makes the process quite fun. I will probably keep doing this for a bit. It's too interesting to stop. And then again, going back to the new people, the finding about yourself, those always apply.
Mm-hmm.
You will end up living with new version of yourself. The, this is the usual stuff, but I definitely say particular to me is this will to enclose everything in a theory, which I'm still working on.
Yeah, sure. Out of curiosity, like what would be now your next country where you want to go, or what is the experience you are right now craving?
I would say I would say the Nordics are an interesting place for me.
Mm-hmm.
I maybe don't see myself working there unless I find a good opportunity. but it will certainly be a place where I would like to spend some time, try to understand that side which I never really got to explore.
Sure.
And another side is Asia. I've never been. And talking about East Asia in particular, Southeast Asia perhaps. Even if I just do trips and vacations, I'm not gonna remember a lot the famous monuments or because there's so many. I
Yeah,
can't fit
true.
them in my head.
Of course.
But perhaps I will take away something about their culture and something about why they are different.
Sure. That's
I don't know if you do
interesting.
the same. Do you, when you go abroad, do you care more about the monuments and, of course, the art and everything is
Yeah.
interesting, but to me it is only interesting if you fit it into this cultural background.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, like due to my cultural background and like where I've born and brought up, I don't need to adjust because it's like a 100 to 0 difference. So like I'm like from a background, I'm Indian and I was in India already. So I already learned how to adapt there and I learned how to adapt here. So it's a 0 to 100 difference. So for me, nothing else is giving me like, oh, okay, I need to adjust here. I fit in somehow. For example, I did my abroad semester in Spain. It wasn't really I was trying. I was just being okay, I will adjust. It's like a 50 thing for me. It's not a 0 to 100 or it's like very different from the culture. But in general, if I go there, I entrust myself for the culture, obviously. The monuments or something, yeah, you can do that, you can see them. But obviously, it's always the culture because it's so different and new to see how people are living, how different it is. Like if you compare Spain and Germany, just talking about siestas, I don't need to say anything more. So it's always interesting. Like adjusting is not a big deal for me, but it's still like interesting to see different cultures.
Okay, so
Yeah.
you trained well. You did the 0 to 100.
I didn't need to train. I was just born with it. So it's fine. So coming to my last question for you, thank you for your question. In general, like for our students or just listeners who are trying to explore life. So if they consider working or studying abroad, what should they be aware of? Anything challenging, anything positive? I think some basics we already know what could be positive and challenging, but maybe your experience was just like very specific, anything what nobody could think of.
Well, if you want to study abroad, I'd say you need to be prepared to be quite outgoing. And it will not be easy. It might be a bit a forced experience. And there is people for which this is not ideal, and maybe the overall experience will not be so nice. But if you can push yourself to do it, and if you can push yourself to not be around the people from your own country, which is something I struggled with, because all these experiences I found Italians. Italians are everywhere.
Well, it's the same with Indian as well. So you
I know.
find them everywhere.
And then you fall so easily into these groups, and you tend
That's
to
true.
create your little Italy or your little India in whatever country you're in. But then you don't discover as much. And it
True.
really doesn't take a lot. It takes a few people. It takes maybe one or two good friends from the country that then makes exploring everything else much easier. You don't need to have a circle of 20 friends. You don't have to pressure yourself into finding that many people. Just find one or two good friends or good acquaintances abroad, and then build from that. Either learn from them or get to know more people from their network. If you take it one step at a time, I think it makes it easier. But then it's such a different experience if you do so, instead of staying with your own group, your own Italian or
Yeah,
Indian group.
sure. Yeah, I get that. Okay, thank you. So now I'm gonna just do that quick fire round, which I
Okay.
usually do. So you just have to answer quickly, as like I'm just gonna ask you questions and you will just pop your answer. So, okay. NGO work or a startup hustle?
Startup hustle.
Europe or somewhere abroad?
Europe.
Europe. Coffee or tea?
Coffee. Espresso.
Yeah, I mean, you're Italian. What did I expect? Books or hands-on experience?
Hands-on experience.
Long-term vision or immediate impact?
Long-term vision.
One value that guides you always.
Curiosity.
Okay. So, Alessandro, thank you very much for sharing your story and your experience. I think it was a very interesting journey you had from A to B or coming here. So it was very amazing and interesting to listen to you. Do you have maybe something last you want to share with our listeners, or anything you want to tell? I mean, you already gave this advice, but maybe a general advice you want to share with everybody?
Of course, one thing only. I'd say think about what you want in life. Think about how you have gotten closer to that, or even closer to figuring out that that's what you want, and build a coherent story from there. Because if you can explain that to people, you're gonna find people that want to help you.
That's nice. I like it. So, as I already said, thank you very much for being here. And thank you very much for you guys listening and staying till to the end. And I will see you in the next episode.